What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most disturbing criminal cases in modern American history, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And I need to warn you right now, this video contains extremely disturbing content about child exploitation and sex trafficking. If you're not ready for that, this is your moment to click away.
And out.
I'm just so excited.
Each girl was considered not only
Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just some random criminal. He was a billionaire financier who moved in the highest circles of American power. We're talking about a man who counted presidents, princes, tech billionaires, and Hollywood A-listers among his close friends. Born in 1953, Epstein made his fortune on Wall Street, though exactly how remains somewhat mysterious. By the 1990s, he had amassed enormous wealth and owned multiple properties. A mansion in Manhattan, a sprawling estate in Palm Beach, Florida, a ranch in New Mexico, an apartment in Paris, and, most infamously, a private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands called Little St. James. That island would become ground zero for his crimes. Locals called it Island of Sin or Pedophile Island. And as we'll see, those names were horrifyingly accurate. But here's what made Epstein different from other predators. He didn't operate alone. He built a system. He had employees, recruiters, assistants, and most importantly, he had protection from some of the most powerful people in the world. The newly released files show Epstein's connections to Donald Trump, mentioned thousands of times in the documents, former President Bill Clinton, photographed extensively with Epstein, Prince Andrew of the British royal family, now hiding in the English countryside, Bill Gates, who allegedly contracted an STD from Russian girls Epstein procured, Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, and countless other influential figures. But the person who made it all possible, the person without whom none of these crimes could have happened, was Ghislaine Maxwell. If Epstein was the monster, Ghislaine Maxwell was the architect, and her story is almost as disturbing as his. Ghislaine came from wealth and power. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was a billionaire media tycoon and allegedly a criminal himself. When he died mysteriously at sea in 1991, officially ruled a suicide, though Ghislaine never believed it, it was discovered he had stolen $400 million from his own company's pension fund. By 1992, Ghislaine had relocated to the United States and quickly became a prominent socialite. She was introduced to Epstein in the late 1980s, and by the mid-1990s, they had begun a romantic relationship. But it was much more than that. She became his right-hand woman, his recruiter, his enabler, and according to trial testimony, sometimes his accomplice in the actual abuse. Here's how the system worked, according to grand jury testimony and victim statements. Maxwell would identify vulnerable young girls, often from broken homes, struggling financially, or dealing with family trauma. She would approach them with offers of modeling opportunities, educational scholarships, or massage jobs that paid well. The FBI testimony reveals one particularly chilling pattern. Victims testified that Maxwell would set up a pyramid scheme. Girls were paid $200, $300 for each new girl they recruited. One witness told the grand jury, "For every girl that I brought to the table, he would give me $200. But here's what makes Maxwell so insidious. She used her gender to build trust. Young girls saw this sophisticated, wealthy woman and thought they were safe. Maxwell would talk to them about their lives, their problems, their dreams. She would normalize massage therapy, slowly breaking down their boundaries. Victim Carolyn testified that Maxwell saw her naked multiple times and once fondled her breasts, buttocks, and hips while she was setting up a massage table. Carolyn was 14 years old. Maxwell told her, "You have a great body for Mr. Epstein and his friends." Let that sink in. A 14-year-old child. Another victim, who testified under the name Jane, described how Maxwell and Epstein groomed her starting when she was 14 at a summer arts camp in 1994. The abuse continued for years, with Maxwell sometimes participating directly in the sexual abuse. The prosecutors made it clear Maxwell befriended her victims, won their trust, slowly broke down their boundaries, and normalized sexual abuse. Years of sexual abuse, multiple victims, devastating psychological harm. None of this could have happened without Maxwell. In December 2021, after years of evading justice, Maxwell was finally convicted on 5 counts of sex trafficking. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She's currently 63 years old and has never admitted to any wrongdoing. But Maxwell was just the operational manager. The real question is, who else was involved? Let's talk about the island, because this is where things get truly disturbing. Epstein purchased Little St. James in 1998 for $795 million. By 2019, it was valued at over $63 million. The 72-acre island featured multiple villas, a helipad, pools, statues, and, according to newly released emails, an extensive underground tunnel system. Yes, you heard that right. Tunnels. Emails released by the DOJ show Epstein was obsessed with these tunnels. Starting in August 2009, there are references to tunnels and an office below the main house, and a subterranean screening room. By 2012, Epstein was sending emails about the tunnel floor, requesting specific wood finishes. In January 2018, just 18 months before his arrest, Hollywood publicist Peggy Siegel asked him in an email, "What's up with the Caribbean island? Staff still sleeping in the tunnels?" Staff sleeping in tunnels. The island had 70 employees at its peak in 2008. According to a former staff member, Epstein insisted on absolute discretion and confidentiality. Employees were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Security was extreme. Local authorities who tried to investigate were stopped at the dock and told they could not enter the private property. Recent photos released by the House Oversight Committee show rooms with what appears to be a dental chair, massage rooms, and bedrooms scattered across the compound. The FBI seized hard drives, phones, photo albums, handwritten notes, and a disc labeled Girl Pics Nude Book 4. Air traffic controllers at the nearby St. Thomas Airport told investigators they witnessed Epstein boarding his private plane on multiple occasions in the company of girls who appeared to be under the age of consent. One former air traffic controller stated, "On multiple occasions I saw Epstein exit his helicopter, stand on the tarmac in full view of my tower, and board his private jet with children, female children." And here's the most damning part. Epstein was a registered sex offender in the Virgin Islands at this time. Local law enforcement knew. They did nothing. One victim tried to escape the island by swimming. Another described being trapped in Epstein's bedroom where he kept a gun strapped to his bedpost. She said, "I couldn't leave. The only means of getting off the island was either helicopter or boat." Between 1995 and 2019, flight log analysis has identified at least 4,966 flights to the island. Now here's where this case goes from disturbing to absolutely enraging. Jeffrey Epstein was first investigated by the FBI in July 2006. They had evidence. They had victim testimony. Multiple underage girls told police and FBI agents that they had been paid to give Epstein sexualized massages. The FBI expected an indictment in May 2007. A draft indictment was prepared that would have charged not just Epstein, but also 3 of his personal assistants who helped facilitate the crimes. So what happened? How did he escape justice? Enter Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney in Miami at the time. Acosta signed off on what can only be described as the most corrupt plea deal in American legal history. Instead of facing federal sex trafficking charges that could have put him away for life, Epstein pleaded guilty to just 2 state charges of soliciting prostitution from a minor, served only 13 months in jail, and spent most of that time on work release, was required to register as a sex offender, which clearly didn't stop anything. And here's the kicker. The deal granted legal immunity to Maxwell and other potential co-conspirators. The victims were never consulted. In fact, they weren't even told about the deal until after it was signed. This violated federal law, specifically the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Who was Alexander Acosta? He would later become Trump's first labor secretary. He resigned in 2019 when the Epstein scandal resurfaced, but the protection didn't stop there. Newly released documents show that Epstein had connections to intelligence agencies, though the specifics remain classified. Some of his victims reported being asked about politicians and powerful figures during their encounters, suggesting Epstein may have been collecting compromising information. The July 2025 DOJ memo concluded there was no evidence. Epstein kept a client list, or blackmailed prominent individuals. But victims and investigators aren't buying it. Too many redactions, too many missing files, too much evidence of systematic cover-up. The January 30, 2026 file release was supposed to be the moment of transparency. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, passed with bipartisan support and signed by President Trump, required the Department of Justice to release all remaining sealed documents. They released 3.5 million pages. But here's the problem. Entire sections are completely redacted. Some documents have 119 pages that are entirely blacked out. And while the names of powerful men appear thousands of times, the details of their involvement are often hidden. Let me break down what we know about the key figures. Donald Trump. The files contain thousands of references to Trump, photos of him with Epstein and Maxwell from the early 2000s, emails where Epstein and others discussed Trump's policies and politics, flight logs placing him on Epstein's planes. Most disturbingly, one victim testified to the FBI that Maxwell presented her to Trump at a party in New York, making it clear she was available. The victim reported a 20-minute conversation with Trump and was later invited to Mar-a-Lago for a tour with both Epstein and Maxwell present. The FBI report notes, nothing happened between Redacted and Trump, but by the things that Maxwell said, it was made clear that Redacted was available. Maxwell said things like, "Oh, I think he likes you. Aren't you lucky? This is great." When asked about the files release, Trump's response was essentially, "I don't know anything." Bill Clinton. Never before seen photographs show Clinton with Epstein on multiple occasions. Flight logs document at least 26 trips on Epstein's plane, the infamous Lolita Express. One former employee of Epstein specifically mentioned meeting Clinton multiple times. In early February 2026, both Bill and Hillary Clinton agreed to testify before Congress about their relationship with Epstein. Prince Andrew. The files show Epstein's name appears at least several hundred times in reference to Prince Andrew. Emails show Epstein trying to set him up on dates. Photos show him with alleged victims. After these latest revelations, Andrew left the royal mansion and went into hiding in the English countryside. Bill Gates. This one is particularly shocking. According to a draft email found in Epstein's files, an email that was never sent but saved, Epstein allegedly helped Bill Gates obtain medication after Gates contracted an STD from Russian girls that Epstein procured. Gates allegedly medicated his wife Melinda without her knowledge. The couple divorced in 2021. Melinda Gates wrote in her memoir that she met Epstein once at her husband's insistence and described the feeling of being near him as terrible. She disapproved of Bill's continued contact with a registered sex offender, but Bill kept meeting with him anyway. The Brazilian connection. Multiple emails reference Brazilian connections. Ike Batista, the Brazilian billionaire, allegedly invited Epstein onto his boat. The Marino family, Itaú Bank, and Marinho family, Globo Media, allegedly met with Epstein's informal intermediary. Epstein attempted to purchase Brazilian modeling agencies, Ford and Joy models. One email from 2018 to Epstein reads, "New Brazilian just arrived, sexy and beautiful, 19 years old." Another, "Found at least 3 very good young poor girls." Interestingly, Globo, Brazil's largest television network, barely covered the Epstein scandal. Makes you wonder what they discussed in those meetings. Other names. The files also reference Walter Cronkite, legendary CBS News anchor. Photographed with Epstein in 2007, Steve Bannon, Trump advisor, Epstein's photo with Maxwell found on Bannon's phone, Elon Musk, mentioned in Epstein's daily schedules, Peter Thiel, also in Epstein's schedules, Michael Jackson, photographed with Clinton and Diana Ross at an Epstein event. Kevin Spacey, mentioned by Epstein's butler Stephen Hawking, mentioned in passing, no wrongdoing alleged. The critical thing to understand, being named in these files doesn't automatically mean someone committed a crime, but it does raise serious questions about who knew what and when. Let's talk about someone who saw it all from the inside. Epstein's butler, Walson Vieira Cotram. Walson worked for Epstein for 18 years as his butler, driver, and cook in Paris. When Epstein died, his will, signed just 2 days before his death, left Walson $2 million. Walson recently broke his silence to the Times newspaper. He flew on Epstein's private jet, the Lolita Express, and met Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Ghislaine Maxwell, and numerous other powerful figures. He keeps a framed photo of himself with Bill Clinton inside the plane. According to Walson, in terms of women, it was a whirlwind. 2 arrived and 2 left every day. But Walson claims he never witnessed any suspicious behavior, which is either the most incredible case of selective blindness in history, or he's been paid very well to keep quiet. His final conclusion: Jeffrey loved life too much to have killed himself. And when asked who knows the truth about the criminal operations, Walson said, "If anyone knows anything, it's Ghislaine Maxwell." On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking of minors. He was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, one of the most secure federal facilities in the country. Exactly 1 month later, on August 10, 2019, he was found dead in his cell. The official cause of death, suicide by hanging. But here's where things get extremely suspicious. Epstein had been placed on suicide watch after an earlier incident, but was removed from it just days before his death. The 2 guards assigned to check on him every 30 minutes allegedly fell asleep and falsified records. Security cameras in the hallway outside his cell allegedly malfunctioned. The autopsy showed injuries more consistent with strangulation than hanging, according to independent forensic experts. Epstein had just signed a new will 2 days before his death, transferring all assets to a trust. The official government position, confirmed in a July 2025 memo: Epstein died by suicide. No evidence of murder. No conspiracy. But FBI Director Kash Patel, when asked directly if there was video evidence of anything else, said, "Do you really think I wouldn't give that to you if it existed?" Notice he didn't say the evidence doesn't exist. He said he doesn't have it to give. Many of Epstein's victims don't believe the suicide story. His butler doesn't believe it. Now let's talk about the most infuriating aspect of the January 2026 file release: what the Department of Justice chose to hide. The Epstein Files Transparency Act specifically stated that redactions should only be used to protect victim identities, national security information, ongoing investigations. But here's what actually happened. Victims exposed, predators protected. Multiple victims reported that their names, addresses, and phone numbers were initially included in the released files, completely unredacted. One victim, Danny Bensky, said, "Having parts of my life exposed this way was really disturbing, but it hurts even more for our sister survivors who are still Jane Does." An email from a Paris modeling agency. New Brazilian just arrived, sexy and beautiful, 19 years old. Agency name, redacted in one version but accidentally left visible in another. A 2018 email. Found at least 3 very good young poor girls. Name, redacted. The draft 2007 indictment mentioned 3 individuals who worked for Epstein and helped him persuade, induce, and entice individuals under 18 years old to engage in prostitution. All 3 names, redacted. FBI interview transcripts with victims, sometimes 7 pages long, had 4 pages completely blacked out. As victim advocate Jess Michaels said, "You can't say, 'There were no men, there was no list,' and then redact such a massive portion of the testimony. If there are no men, there's no reason to redact. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche admitted errors were made when at least 16 files temporarily disappeared from the DOJ website, including a photograph showing President Trump. They were later restored, but the incident raised questions about whether files were being selectively controlled. Of the 6 million potentially responsive pages the DOJ identified, only 3.5 million were released. The other 2.5 million withheld under claims of attorney-client privilege, deliberative process privilege, or because they might harm ongoing investigations. The excuse? Think about it. We're talking about a stack of papers that goes from the floor to the height of 2 Eiffel Towers. Meanwhile, victims are receiving death threats because their information was carelessly exposed, while the names of powerful predators remain protected. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about something that I think is really important: how this case is being managed to reduce public impact. There's a tactic called burnout psychology, or information flooding, where you overwhelm the public with so much information, so many contradictory claims, such an excess of data, that people become confused and eventually stop caring. Think about what's happened with the Epstein case. First, it was conspiracy theories about satanic rituals and cannibalism, completely unproven. Then wild claims about him faking his death based on anonymous 4chan posts, theories about him being a Mossad agent, claims that he never died at all. Some of these might contain grains of truth. Most are probably false. But here's the thing: when you mix real evidence with wild speculation, you diminish the weight of what actually happened. And I think that's intentional. The real story is horrifying enough. A wealthy financier built a systematic operation to sexually exploit underage girls, with help from a well-connected socialite, protected by powerful men in business and politics, and enabled by corrupt law enforcement for decades. That's the real scandal. We don't need to add satanic panic to make it worse. In fact, doing so actually helps the perpetrators because it makes the whole thing sound like a conspiracy theory rather than a documented criminal enterprise. The mainstream media has been notably quiet about these file releases. Why? Probably because many media executives and journalists were themselves part of Epstein's social circle. It's uncomfortable. It implicates people they know. But the public isn't letting this go. Social media is keeping this story alive even when CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC would rather talk about anything else. So where does this leave us? What we know for certain: Jeffrey Epstein ran a massive sex trafficking operation for decades. Ghislaine Maxwell was his primary accomplice and is serving 20 years. Dozens of powerful men had relationships with Epstein. The 2008 plea deal was corrupt and denied victims justice. The 2026 file release was heavily redacted to protect powerful figures. Victims continue to be re-traumatized by careless handling of their information. What remains unknown: the full extent of who participated in the abuse, whether Epstein's death was truly suicide, why certain names remain protected while others are exposed. What comes next? Bill and Hillary Clinton are scheduled to testify before Congress about their relationship with Epstein. The DOJ claims more documents may be released. Victims continue to seek justice through civil lawsuits, and the public continues to demand accountability. Look, I know this was heavy. I know it's disturbing. But these stories need to be told. The victims, many of whom were just 14, 15, 16 years old when this happened, deserve to have their truth acknowledged. The system failed them catastrophically. Refuse to let information overload make us numb to injustice. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Please share this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with your thoughts. But keep it respectful. We're talking about real victims here. And remember, speaking truth to power only works if we keep speaking. I'll see you in the next one. Stay vigilant.